Hey, what is going on, Dave? How are you doing today?
Joe, how the heck are you doing, sir?
I am doing very, very well. Again, it's our
Most
time of the
excellent.
week that we can get together and chat up some different topics.
Yes, sir.
So I will jump right into it. And I want to welcome our viewers and listeners to the Journeys of Not So Ordinary podcast, where you got me, Dr. Joe Hamlett, as one of your co hosts, and my esteemed colleague here, Dr. Dave Peltz.
Thank you.
So today's topic, very excited about this because for one, me and Dave have already been thinking about this one for a while. And then the other really exciting thing is this is a request, a special request from a viewer or listener who's been following the show, who's a colleague and friend. So I want to thank her for tuning in to all the episodes and for this suggestion. So the topic today is mentoring. So that mentor mentee relationship. So again, we've already been thinking about this one because it's very important as you think about your personal growth and development. And so this is one of those things that will help you get there. In essence, this show is kind of a mentoring show. It's not that close and personal relationship that you might have with your mentor or mentee, but this is kind of along the lines of what a mentor might do or help you with, just point out some of these types of things. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my esteemed colleague and let him get started on mentoring.
Yes, I'm excited to meet this person. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, mentoring. This is a great topic. There is a distinction between mentoring and coaching,
Yep.
and we might touch on that a little bit. But the thing that I was just thinking about when we were contemplating this topic is when you think about it, in maybe a slightly arbitrary way, you know, some of our first mentors that we've had in our lives were our teachers as we were growing up
Right.
in
Yep.
elementary, junior high, and high school. I mean, I remember, you know, some of my teachers, I liked them and some of them I didn't. But there
Right.
was one when I started really getting into art my senior year or my in my high school years, really became that kind of mentor, to all of his students, and he really did provide that focus and that one-on-one feedback and allow us to explore and then offer suggestions and then ask us what we think and get us to really be creative about not, building off of those suggestions to create solutions. And
Right.
so that's kind of where my mind goes back to. I was thinking, where did mentoring for me really start? And that's really where it started. I mean, we could even say our parents, but I would prefer to kind of stay away from the parental side of things and really focus
Right.
on the
Right.
mentoring piece itself. So not to take away from mentors that are parents, or parents that are mentors to their children, but just for the sake of this discussion. But yeah,
Right.
that's kind of what I
Right.
was thinking. It's where it kind of started for me, and then it evolved from there into my military career and other jobs. I would either seek out a mentor or they would seek me out and offer to be a mentor. So I've also been a mentor as well as a mentee, just like Joe. So I mean, it's really kind of a great dynamic to discuss.
So and I just thought about this as you were talking about your high school teacher or instructor that helped you with mentoring. And I reflect back on, I was in high school my junior year, and I selected a class. I selected accounting, and it was kind of a filler class. And at the time, I did really enjoy numbers and crunching numbers and seeing how they work. Um, so I took that class and I did well. So my instructor recommended that I take a 3 hour um, VOTEC course that,
Hmm.
that was offered in the morning. You could go to the VOTEC, do your training there, and then come back to the school. And so, that was his suggestion or recommendation. And I went with it. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was only a 16-year-old kid. So I went with it and signed up for it. And what was funny was that um, I was really advanced and didn't realize it till later. much later, which was probably too late to, go after a career in accounting. But
Mhm.
I realized I excelled in that class. And this is back in the 80s when computers were just coming online. And so
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
one of the first people that started inputting data into, in reference to accounting anyway, putting numbers into computers and data processors. So he saw that potential in me where I didn't see it in myself. So to your point, he was probably my first mentor that really saw something in me, but he didn't elaborate. Like you said, he didn't say, "Hey, I think you'll be good at this." He just suggested that I take that
Mhm.
class, and
Yeah.
like I say, I did excel in that class. I was well ahead of my peers in the class, and think back if I'd have really pursued that, where might I be today? But in reference to mentoring, so mentoring is a great tool, but the perception behind mentoring, which I had this perception for a lot of years, was that it's the wise old individual training some new person. So I always kind of reference it to the Karate Kid, where you got Mr. Miyagi and Ralph Macchio. I can't even remember his character he played, but him providing all this wisdom to Daniel-san, that's what it was, Daniel.
Mhm.
For him to learn how to be a karate expert, he had to follow everything he said. And so that was kind of my perception. And I always even likened it to like big brothers, big sisters, where you
Mhm.
got this person that you meet. Typically, again, I'm thinking a younger person, you meet them, you all get together at dinner, you go out for a movie, and then you discuss this. So I always thought of it as this really time consuming event
Mhm.
that occurred or program that you were in. So it has been in recent years, probably within the last 10 years, that I really gained a greater appreciation for mentoring. And what I mean by that is actually before that, because back in 2005, when I went back to school and hadn't been in school 20 plus years, so I need assistance. I'm struggling with how to get through classes. Who is probably best suited to help me with that? Is it my peers that are 40ish like me,
Mhm.
or is it those 18-year-old young airmen that just joined the unit and that are in college? And that's who it was. They
Mhm.
became my mentors as
Mhm.
far as education, because I went to them. I said, "Hey, I'm struggling with school. How do you get through these classes? How do you do this?" And they helped me get through those first couple of classes to where I could create my own rhythm afterwards. But it was not without them assisting me with this. So this is why this is important, because without forming a relationship with them first, that would have been a challenge. So
Yes.
that's the piece that's missing for a lot of people when they think of mentoring and mentee. It's just that, and that kind of the perception I had, that I go to this person, they're going to help me with all my problems. And it's not that way.
No. Mhm.
It is a mutual relationship, because those 18-year-olds coming in who were the same age as my kids when they were joining, and they came in there with the expectation somebody's going to teach me and train me. And that was my responsibility as a trainer, for one, as a as a leader within the organization. So those were the formal aspects of that. But for me, it was the building that relationship with those young people at the very beginning, helping
Mhm.
them, starting off in a brand new career, me thinking back to where I was at 17 and 18 when I joined the military. So for me, that's what that piece of the relationship, that's the part I always didn't understand or didn't know was very important to that mentor relationship. And so for me, that's what it's always been about, establishing those relationships. That's first part of mentoring 101, because
Mhm.
again, I built up a relationship to them where I could go to them. I felt comfortable going to them as a 40 something year old man, going to these young 18-year-olds and saying, "Hey, can you help me? I'm struggling with school."
Mhm.
Right. If I had my pride, or if I, had not built that relationship with them, then that could have been an awkward situation. But
Right.
having established that relationship with them first, and again, in my capacity to help them or to assist them, in return, they were willing to assist me. And not to go too much longer on this, but because of that mentorship, because of that relationship we built, 3 or 4 of those young gentlemen went on to be, officers in the military, senior leaders in the military, and actually one of them just retired after 20 years as an officer in the military. Which again, not to brag or toot my own horn, but the fact that again, I took the time to get to know them and continued that relationship throughout our 20 plus years. Now he's a successful businessman. So not again to take any credit for all the hard work he did, but I just know, or even being part of his success, I know I had a small part to play on that, as well as him having a large part on me continuing my education. So,
Mhm.
so I just wanted us to establish the importance of building those relationships is how that mentoring and mentee process works. Not again, that mentee coming in starry-eyed with a notepad and you as the mentor just giving them the blueprint
Right.
to be successful. So again, I know you've been anxious to jump in there too, so I'll get off my
Yeah, no, that's good. I really enjoyed what you were saying, and it started to make me think, how can we real quickly explain the difference between coaching and mentoring? And coaching is that kind of person that's, and I'm going to put this in the frame of like a work scenario, Joe being my supervisor, and I go to Joe saying, "Hey, I've got a problem. How do I fix this?" And then Joe takes the time to spend with me to show me some tools and tricks and tips
right,
and skills to improve my performance. Whereas mentoring is really about looking further down the line. How can I develop myself personally and professionally? And that's why it's more about asking questions and providing suggestions to elicit the mentee's perspective and how they're identifying with the suggestion to let them develop their own solution. So if I say, "Hey Joe, I'd like to, go from line staff to manager," Joe's not going to tell me every step I need to take because
right,
that's more of a coaching thing versus him saying, "Well, why are you interested in becoming a manager?" And then I'd start talking about why I'm interested in it. And he goes, "Well, how do you think you could get there?" And then I would start thinking, "Well, how could I get there?" And then Joe might say, "Well, have you thought about these things? How would you incorporate those?" So it's really about getting the mentee to come up with their own solutions and
right,
build from their own perspectives with some with some insight from someone who's kind of been there and done that without the mentor saying, "You will do this when I tell you to do it."
right, right.
So that's an
That's a
important distinction.
I was just going to say that is one of the biggest, most important things in that relationship, because like you
Hmm.
said, everything we've talked about to this point has again been recommendations, suggestions on our
Hmm.
part, based on our perspective, based on how
Yeah.
we did it. And again, as a receiver of this information, it's still up to you to make the decision on how
Right.
it fits in, how
Or
you
if it
apply it,
doesn't
or
fit
if
in,
it
and
doesn't.
yeah,
Exactly. But our jobs or roles as mentors is to provide that outside
right.
or different perspective, and then allow that person that's receiving it to see how it applies to them.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you made that distinction. That's one of the most important things. Is again, we're not telling you how to do it.
Right.
It's just making suggestions, recommendations. So
Yeah. And throughout my career, I've always sought out a mentor regardless of age, regardless of
right,
position, company, because having a mentor is great because no one knows everything. And if you
right,
do, then that's a separate discussion we should probably have offline.
right, right,
I'd be very curious.
right,
So, but we all can learn and we can all glean insights from other people's perspectives who have walked that line, been there, done that, learn from their lessons without them telling us
right,
directly,
right,
"Don't do this." We can say, "Fire is hot. but it's up to
Right.
me as the mentee to determine, am I going to touch that fire, test it for myself? Am I going to go near it? Am I going to get other perspectives? So I've always sought out mentors, and like I said, I've been a mentor many times. And the dynamic, to your point, Joe, the relationship building piece is extremely important. Finding a good, compatible person to be your mentor.
Right.
And ethnogeo might be part of it, having a diverse mentor-mentee relationship, or having same. It really just depends on the need of the mentee and the mentor to
Right.
say,
Right.
I think this is a good fit. I think I can help you with this. I've got the skills to help you get to the next level, or to help you get where you want to be. And the mentee has to say, I like what this person has to offer, or, well, that's not really quite what I was looking for. I don't want someone like this. I'm thinking I might want someone a little bit more like that. That being said, both the mentor and mentee have to be there has to be a little flexibility in there, because you don't necessarily want a exactly
Right.
the same
Right.
type relationship. You want that diversity of experience and thought,
Right.
regardless, or maybe considering ethnogeo to be a part of that. So,
Well, and from you say you seeked out mentors, and I probably did, but I didn't say, hey, I'm going to go find a mentor. But I think I did it differently, and for me, it's always been about relationships, and so just getting to know people, and like you say, the compatibility piece. Do we click on the same level, or do we have similarities? Do we have differences? So for me, that's where it all starts, because one of my best mentors in the military was first someone that I just started a relationship with. Just
right.
he was a senior leader.
You kind of
Uh,
stumble into a
yeah,
relationship that
and
becomes
that's
a
what happened.
mentor-mentee relationship, and sometimes it's more of a formal application process. So
Right,
that's a great point, Joe.
and this way I learned. Me and him just had conversations, and it got to a point that he became my mentor, because he became higher up in the chain, and I could respect that he was going to tell me the truth. He was not going to sugarcoat it. He was going to tell me the reality of it, and I really appreciated that about
Yeah.
him, because again, we'd established that relationship early on, to where he trusted me and I trusted him, and he trusted that, again, even if he told me the sky was red and I knew it was blue, he trusted I was going to say, okay, thanks for that information, even though you might be totally wrong, but thanks for that information. And so that's why I always go back to that relationship piece, is because you don't want a mentor that's just going to say, hey, that looks great, that looks great,
Right.
and it's not great. You want them to tell you the real deal. So
Yeah.
you have to have that mentor that's going to give it to you straight.
Yeah, and I like how you said the piece about trust, because that's really a huge piece of it. To your point, the mentor or the mentee doesn't have to be 100% correct all the
Right.
time,
Right.
but to that point, you don't want someone that's just going to be BSing you and throwing smoke your way, so that they can feel like they have that position of authority over you and they have
Right.
to know everything. A
Right.
really good mentor knows their limitations. Like, if someone were to
Exactly.
come to me and say, "Hey, Dave, you know, can we, maybe formalize this relationship?" Sure, we'll make mentor mentee. Great. I'd like, I'm thinking about going into basketball and sports, and I could sit there and blow smoke at someone all day long,
Right.
except for about sports. That's just not what I do. And
Right.
then there's some people that are really into sports that are like, what do you want to know? Let's talk about this. And they'd have a great conversation. So really, that level of trust is an imperative. And
Right.
you have to be able to, your point, the sky is red, well, I think it's blue, and that's okay. But what is the mentee going to do with that? And how is the mentor going to allow that to impact or not impact themselves as well as the mentee? And that's where that diversity of thought comes in. And there's lots of
Right.
different studies out there that show the dynamics, and that can go into the relationship piece of it, and different tools and stuff like that of being a mentor. And there's some great tools and trainings out there. But it's important to keep that in mind, that trust is probably the biggest, most important foundational piece of mentoring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you talk about the trust piece. So my doctoral program, we were actually assigned a mentor. and this was a formal setting. So,
Mhm.
you're assigned a mentor based on whatever, goal you're trying to achieve, which in my case, it was, my degree in organization, business administration was specialized in organizational leadership. So they paired me up with a mentor that had that background.
Mhm.
And initially, it's built like a 2-year relationship with this individual. Well, fast forward this 2 years, and I was put in a position where they let go of this mentor for reasons that were not aligned. So
Mhm.
I had to start over with a brand new mentor. And you talk about the trust piece.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when I got this brand new mentor, the first thing she said to me was, we need to start the whole process over, basically writing of the dissertation. And I said, what do you mean? We
Mhm.
need to rewrite certain sections. She said, no, the entire thing.
Wow.
And I said, I don't think I can do that. And the first thing she said to me was, trust me. I've done this.
Mhm.
I've got a reputation for doing this. And, with a great pause, lengthy pause, because again, that trust is just not, you just can't earn it overnight. You just,
Right.
like I said, this is our very first meeting. Within 15, 20 minutes, she's talking about trust. And I'm sitting here because I had just trusted my previous mentor
Mhm.
and it didn't pan out too well. So now I'm being asked again to trust. And
Yeah.
so again, with long pause and hesitation, I did agree to trust her. And over the years, a couple of years I've worked with her, we established that trust and that relationship, and I was successful. But that is a huge part of that, like you
Yes.
said, part of that mentor mentee relationship is that trust part, along with the relationship.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes the advice and suggestions and the nuggets that a mentor poses to a mentee may not align with what the mentee wants to hear or is expecting to hear.
Right. Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and to kind of put things into perspective, for those that aren't familiar with what a dissertation is, it can be anywhere depending on whether it's, well, I won't go into more details of the types, but they can range anywhere from 80 to 2 or more hundred pages in text. It's you're
Right.
essentially writing a small to large book.
Right.
And, depending on how far you get into it, if you're 50 or 100 or 150 or 200 pages of single spaced or double spaced text, that's a big ask to say, Joe, I know you're
Yes.
150 pages into this 200 or 100 pages into this 150. We're going to have you start over.
Right.
That's like a big kick in the teeth.
Oh, it
And that's
was.
something that you have to really, to Joe's point, really think about. Am I ready for this type of, is this the type of mentor I want, or do I want a different type of mentor? And I'm glad you thought about it and then went with it, because that's oftentimes where the most growth occurs.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I would like to kind of extend this thought on mentoring. One of the questions I've been asked many times is, how long is this going to last? This mentor mentee relationship. I've been asked by mentors, well, how much time do you want me to spend with you? And how long are we going to be doing this? How many months or whatever?
Right.
And from a mentee perspective, what's the mentee's perspective on how long is this going to last and the frequency and the duration? So that, to answer that question, it just depends. The mentor
Right.
and mentee have to come to an agreement. It's not a one-sided relationship. It's not a one size fits all. It's not, oh, 2 hours a week for 3 days a week for 5 years. It may not be that. It may be that, but it's not a one size fits all. It may be 30 minutes every 2 weeks. It may be 30 minutes, twice or three times a week. It might be an hour sessions. It might be 2 hour, 4 hour sessions. It just depends on what the relationship, what the agreement on that relationship looks like.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because you were talking along the formal
Mhm.
side of mentoring, mentoring and mentee relationship, because I also like to think of the informal side of it,
Yes,
where,
there's that
you
side
know,
too, which is
uh,
really
uh,
cool.
yeah, a lot of times you don't set up a schedule. You just say, hey, I haven't talked to you for 3 weeks. Hey,
Mhm.
this is what's going on,
Right,
and this is the situation I'm running into. Can you help me with this? And
right.
so I just, and that's why when I'm, preface this at the very beginning, I said, hey, you know, it scared me away all the time, when you set these formal plans of mentoring,
It
because
can,
again,
yes, yeah,
now it turns into that thing I have to do, and that's why
right,
so many people are hesitant of that approach, because again, uh, now it's almost becomes a burden to you in some
right.
cases. So
On both sides, mentor and
on both
mentee.
sides, right? Yeah. Now there's an expectation I have to meet once a week. And that's why I say I liken it to kind of the big brother, big sister. I
Hmm.
got to take you to
Yeah,
dinner. We got to go to a show, and that's why I say a lot of people view it as that commitment they're not ready to make, and so that's why I like the informal approach, where again, we have this understanding that, hey, if I run into an issue, I'll give you a call, or
right,
and I love that type of mentoring process, just because I'm not going to sit here with one mentor for one.
right.
Again, I go back to the
That's a great
relationship.
point, Joe. I mean, you can have more than one mentor at a
Right,
time,
right,
and you can
yes,
actually be a mentee while you're a mentor at the same
exactly,
time.
absolutely,
It's a
and so
very, it's a
that
very dynamic tool.
right, because I go back to, we said this over and over again. It's all about gathering as much information that you can, so that you can make a decision that's going to apply to your situation,
Right.
that's going to assist you. So that's why I say, I don't, when you limit yourself to one mentor, so you get one mentor, they're going to give you only their perspective, the way
Right.
they see it, the way they view it or experienced it. Now, if
Yep.
I go and grab 5 or 6 people, say I'm trying to become a senior leader in an organization, I can follow the path of that one person, or I can get those multiple perspectives from multiple people as mentors, and then come back and compile my own idea of
Yep.
what I think I should do. So that's important, again, to not limit yourself to, this one mentor relationship. But it's almost, you have to be careful with that, because people may take an offense to it as, I'm taking the time out to give you this, and then I see you down the hall with Jim, and you're getting the same thing from him. So some people, you may have to, again, establish those terms at the very
Hmm.
beginning, to let people know that you're going to see other mentors,
Yeah.
that
Or
you
other mentees. You might have more than one mentee,
exactly.
and early in my career, I fell into that trap. I was thinking a similar type situation. I was like, well, I thought so and so was my mentor, and now what is he
Right.
doing with that
Yep.
person? That's
Yep.
my mentor, that's my
Right.
doctor, that's my
Exactly.
teacher. And you do, as a mentee and a mentor, you can, those types of feelings can grow and emerge, and
Right.
it's not a bad thing. It's just something we have to be cognizant of,
Right.
and
Right.
be respectful of, because like a physician, we're not the only client. you
Right.
know
Right.
they
Yeah.
the a good physician or a good mentor, that relationship will feel like that is the only one-on-one relationship that you have
Absolutely. Every time. Yeah. When you sit
every
in the
time.
office
And
with
you can meet
them,
with
they're
5 mentees or 5
exactly.
mentors, and it's still going to feel like we're the only 2 people that
Absolutely.
matter, and that's a
Absolutely.
good relationship. And that's a good dynamic. And to Joe's point, multiple mentees for a mentor, or multiple mentors for a mentee, that's what you really want ideally. And
Right.
to Joe's point, he mentioned a few minutes ago, the informal side of being a mentor or mentee is where you just kind of, where it's an organic introduction that leads to this organic relationship.
Right.
And then you
Right.
realize almost after the fact, but not before the relationship ends, hey, this person's been mentoring and I didn't even realize it.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
this is my mentee and I really didn't think about it that way. So,
Right. Exactly.
and that's kind of a cool relationship versus going
Absolutely.
informal. And many organizations have switched to a very formalized
Right.
mentoring
Yeah.
program. And there's a purpose and reason behind that. And it's not good or bad. It's just they want to formalize it so they can make sure that, one, the program is successful, and two,
Right.
that both sides, the mentor and the mentee, are getting what they need out of it.
So you talk about the, formal and informal. So my current job, everyone that gets hired on there, you get a mentor. So, and that's to help you with, learning the new culture, the new organization that you're part of, which helps you. Again, they've been there, and they've been through setting your shoes, so they understand that. So they're going to help you with that transition. But what's funny in my case, I hired on, and my mentor was a much younger gentleman than me. Um,
Lots to
so
be said about that. Lots
exactly. So
many
we
people that are older don't seek out younger mentors.
right, right.
And that's almost a disservice to yourself, because that's a perspective that we're not allowing ourselves to consider.
So again, but again, kind of to the point where I, reached out to those young gentlemen that were in school. Same thing.
Yeah.
He's now been with the organization several years, so he understands again that transition that I need to make to get to the next level. So that's how it all started. But
Mm-hmm.
eventually, like you said, these relationships start to grow, and you start to build these relationships. It switched. So although he was my mentor at work, I became his mentor outside of work. And so I began to help him with his personal growth, his
Mm-hmm.
personal development. But it all was established with that formal relationship that we maintain at work. But then it turned into, the conversations about life and about how to progress and move forward. So that was a perfect example of how a formal mentoring program that was established turned into that personal mentoring on the side. So, and also want to go back to where you touched on, the mentoring piece where you don't know you're being mentored until almost after it's done. And that's really what happened to me as I became a senior leader, in the military. I made it all the way up to E7. And then there was a couple opportunities. I got to E8. And then at the time, our command chief, who was the senior enlisted advisor to the wing commander, was a woman of color, African American woman, which was very rare
Mm-hmm.
to see an organization. In fact, she was the only one at our organization.
Wow.
And so she didn't come to me and say, "Hey, Joe, I'm going to mentor you." What she did was she just started to include me and invite me to, events outside of that
Mm-hmm.
local area, that wing, and started taking me to conferences. And the first conference I went to with her, I walk into a room. There was other command chiefs in the room, but what do you think I saw in that room when I first walked into that room? What do you think?
Mentors and mentees. Mm-hmm.
I saw more people of color, more black males or African American males and women, and it started to click to me that you know what, I could one day be a chief and command chief. And again, without her saying, "Hey, you're being your mentor. I'm going to
Yeah.
expose you to these different things," but that's literally what she did. She helped me see that I could potentially be there one day because again,
Nice.
my scope was limited and just seeing her. And prior to her, there was a male that had sat in that position, but again, there was basically one at a time. There was
Right.
never two. And so again, to go to this environment where throughout the entire Air National Guard, there were more examples of leaders, that looked like me. So that was a very powerful thing for me. And like I say, she didn't come to me and say, "Hey, I'm going to get you to this level." She just, again, just included me,
Mm.
helped me see that there were opportunities for me. So I really appreciated the fact that she was mentoring me without telling me, without calling me and
Right.
say, "Hey, let's sit down and talk about your future." She didn't do that. I think she saw enough in me because we built a relationship that she knew I would grasp it, that she
Right.
knew I would understand what she was trying to show me. And like I say, it wasn't until later. But what was funny, at her retirement, she said, I said, "Thank you for mentoring me." And she said, "No, thank you for mentoring me."
Wow.
And and
That's
back to
cool.
your point, again, she was older than me. And so to your point, I was just thinking to myself, how did I mentor you? How did you mentored me? You had all this experience, you had all this knowledge that you passed on to me. So how was I reciprocating that? And it really, boggled me for a while to really understand that I mentored her too. And I later understood what she meant by that. So again, going back to all of us have something to offer other people
Yeah.
and recognizing that. And in a lot of cases, you don't recognize it, but other people do. And that's
Yeah.
why they come to you. That's why they want you to be their mentor and those types of things. So I just wanted to include that, the non-mentoring mentoring that
Right.
was
Right.
happening to me and didn't realize it. And then again, to realize I was mentoring her which it still just blows my mind to think that, because she had overcome so many obstacles and was first at this, the first at that, and it just, but again, I was amazed all the things that she had done or accomplished. And she never came to me and told. I didn't even learn these things until she was actually in her retirement speech when they were, reading off all of these things. So
Yeah.
it was that organic relationship that formed, and
And
we
that
went from
and
there.
that's the important piece. I would like us to
Yep.
circle back about the relationship and the trust. That's really imperative.
Yep.
As we wrap up the last few minutes here, I'll throw out my few final thoughts. If
Okay.
you have the opportunity, be a mentor or be a mentee,
Yep.
because there's so much gratification that goes on being both sides of that relationship, and it's really a huge opportunity eh, to participate in. So that's my recommendation. You can do what you want, but that's my final thoughts, Joe.
Well, thanks for that, Dave. And like we've been mentioning, throughout this entire session or podcast, the importance of mentoring is that relationship. It's building that relationship with somebody. And again, not going into it with these hidden agendas, with these things that you're uh, purposely holding back and not helping your mentor understand what you're trying to achieve, or even your mentee. So it's about establishing that relationship and then building that trust, and then going from there. So like Dave said, I've been a mentor now for a lot of years. I'm in formal settings. I'm a mentor on different platforms. And then again, if somebody reaches out to me and they want me to be their mentor, I'll gladly do that. And like you said, we're always been mentees ourselves. So being both sides of it, that's very important for your growth, your development, because as I mentioned earlier, we can all learn from one another, regardless of age or any of those other separating factors or dividing factors. We all have something that we could provide others. So consider being a mentor and be a mentee. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. And again, I want to thank my colleague and friend for maybe getting us further faster here to this mentoring mentee topic, which again, we wanted to talk about it. But thank you for, again, continuing to support our podcast and listening. And really appreciate you for doing that and making a suggestion. So if anybody out there would like to hear some topics, other topics that we haven't discussed to this point, feel free to reach out to us either on LinkedIn, on this podcast, either whatever platform you're listening on, or personal emails. Just reach out to us and we would be glad to talk about that topic. So with that, I know I've rambled on a little bit. We just want to continue to encourage you to be your not so ordinary you. Until next time on the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast,